Yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us here on INC Live for the UFC 303 preview show. My name is Karl Bainbridge and I am joined by the man on the right hand side of my screen. He is the Jack Lemmon to my Walter Matthau. He's my friend and yours. It's Joe Neal. Joe, thank you very much for joining us.
Are you implying that we're the original odd couple, Ayla, Skinner, and Homer Simpson?
I was actually
No, it's
thinking
over.
more sort of grumpy old men because you are officially one of them. Happy birthday for this week, 30 years old.
Yeah. Turned on the 16th. I turned 30, and it was horrible. No, it's fine. It's been fine so far. I like older women, so that's been kind of nice to be like, well, I'm not in my 20s anymore, ladies. But I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be because I'm a big dork. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is getting re-released finally this year, so I'm glad to be the Cyclops from the X-Men, Scott Summers, to your Ryu from Street Fighter.
I'll take it.
Yeah, a lot of people say that Ryu and Chun-Li should get together. Lucky you. In fact, I think I want to switch.
I was more of a Mortal Kombat man, I have to be honest.
I grew up with Mortal Kombat love. I'm one of those dorks that likes stories in fighting games, and Mortal Kombat has my favorite because I'm a Johnny Cage guy.
And also, Mortal Kombat also had Ronda playing Sonya Blade, so there's a bit of a bias in that regard. It wasn't
horrible.
Great, I have to be honest.
It was horrible. Yeah, I'm a big Johnny Cage and Scorpion fan, so I'm not saying I did my fatalities on her only, but just kidding.
I have to say a big thank you to everybody who has been tuning in. This is not a computer game show. We are here to talk about mixed martial arts, and we're talking about what is normally one of the big marquee cards of the year. So International Fight Week always takes place either at the back end of June, early on in July. But also with that though, there is always a little bit of a hazard when it comes to IFW, because if you go through the history books, you'll find that nearly every International Fight Week has either been marred by a last-minute fight cancellation, a big main event pulling out, failed steroid tests, and I'm afraid to say, Joe, it has also happened once again. Now, anybody who's been following you online or watched your big breaking news video earlier on in the week, you were very sceptical about the prospect of Conor McGregor fighting Michael Chandler. What made you so confident this fight wasn't going to take place?
For me, I personally felt like he, in the later half of his career, he's become this guy who wants to talk, but he used to want to walk the walk, unless it was against a wrestler, of course, but a wrestler with a full training camp, I should add, because Chad Mendes technically, but he used to want to walk the walk, and he really hasn't, he really hasn't wanted to do that. He said he was going to fight, feels like 1,000 people, and none of it's really ever happened. And it is clear he is on the drugs, he's drunk a lot, and he is on a lot of roids. I watched Roadhouse this year. It was horrible. Watch our review.
Please.
Yeah, it was really fun, actually. But it was a horrible movie. And he is on so much of everything in that movie. His head is huge. I currently hold the bronze medal and biggest heads in the world club. Silver medal is Tito. Pound for pound, Henry Cejudo is number one. But Conor is looking to come after my medal, my bronze. And with all the roids he's doing, it's making his head bigger. Literally, not figuratively. I don't think it can get any bigger figuratively. And I thought if he fights, if USADA's around, he's popping hot. There's no way he doesn't. With now the drug testing is potentially going to be more lenient because it's behind closed doors now. It's a little awkward. That's why John Jones is excited to come back. But I figured something was going to happen, like along the lines of him not showing up. Plus, I think it's kind of funny. Like, I think this would make me a little bit of a Conor fan. Again, nothing against Michael Chandler. I like him, but I'm more neutral than anything to him. But it'd be kind of funny if he's just doing this just to mess with Michael Chandler. Like, yeah, I'll fight you. And just pulls out. He was always going to pull out. It's like an old picture of his toe. Just, it'd be kind of funny, actually. It'd make me look like Conor a little more.
I still have confidence that the fight is going to take place. And I say this for a couple of reasons. And I think the big one for me is there is a lot of big egos when it comes to sport, and especially combat sport. And I think a lot of fighters also want to think about what's the best way to go out. And I think from Conor's perspective, let's say Conor called it a day, like this afternoon. The last memory of him in the octagon is him sat on the floor, clutching onto his broken leg, shouting at Dustin Poirier that his wife was in his DMs. Not a good way to go out. So I think from his perspective, for his ego, he would want to have one more big marquee win, or even like a marquee performance. Even if you sort of like went out on his shield in like an heroic loss, that's still a decent way to go out. Like, I've always said that Chris Weidman didn't need to come back after the Uriah Hall fight, but he didn't want that last memory of him to be him with a broken leg. So he just wanted to have one more fight to say, I did come back.
And now it's gotten to his head.
That's the one issue, because if you have a good performance when you come back, you start thinking, hey, maybe I'm good enough to get one more run. It's a awful cycle, and I've seen a lot of fighters fall into it.
Yeah, this is a sport that isn't too kindly to when you hang on too long, you know. And it's really easy to hang on too long. It's really hard to know when the exit's there and waiting for you. You know, I feel like there's a lot of times fighters, damn. I mean, like Tony Ferguson still hasn't retired, and that drives us nuts. You know, that's why it's kind of refreshing, even though it feels too early. It's probably it's refreshing to hear a guy like Gaethje and Dustin openly talk about how much time they got left. Like I'm surprised Dustin didn't call it a day, because for me, even though Dustin didn't win that fight, I think that's that fight. Kind of really heroic loss where people could say, yeah, you know what, good on you, Dustin, and we're not gonna begrudge you for walking away. Yeah, I would. I mean, how could you? You know, everyone's a Dustin Poirier. Like, Joanna was the same for me, because obviously she's going in the Hall of Fame this week. Like, Joanna, the way she went out against... It wasn't sad watching Joanna fight, whereas it could have started being if you continued after Whaley. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there who it's sad to watch fight. And then you go, they're in their 20s? Oh, my God. Makayev, dude, come on. It's for you. In terms of fight style, he may be one of my least favorite fighters on the roster right now. It sucks because I remember his debut, and it was awesome. Yeah, I think maybe in future the UFC should be keeping him on the prelims. And speaking of the prelims, we're going to be talking about those right now. You can see those on our screen here. Now, I often say when it comes to the UFC, a good way to identify who the company has high hopes for is to look at their big marquee events and see who's on the prelims. So we're talking Conor McGregor undercards, we're talking International Fight Week, Madison Square Garden. Is there anybody here on the prelims that stands out for you to potentially be, yes, that guy's going to be the next big thing in 2 or 3 years' time? I know a lot of people were talking about like Ray Saruya. I've seen that name pop up. Apparently, according to Tapology, he's the number 1 ranked guy in Japan at flyweight. But I think you can take that with a grain of salt. It's just kind of how it is. The big name of like the guy who's going to be huge in a long time is Peyton Talbot. This guy is awesome. Peyton Talbot is so much fun and is just a ball of fun. 8-0, a lot of finishes, a lot of KOs at a smaller weight class, which is awesome. And he's a blast and a half. He's either 2-0 or 3-0 in the UFC. I think he's 2-0. But I think I'm also counting the Contender Series, so Probably like 1-0 then. He's so much fun. If you believe Joe Pfeiffer's mom's claims about his punching power, then he's another name on here. And he's taken on known grinder Marc-Andre Barriault. I butcher that name every time. From Oklahoma. My twang stops me from vocalizing a lot.
If
of
it makes you
words.
feel better, Joe, we say all right is Alvit up here in the northeast of England, so you're not alone. Alvit
Really?
Petter Yedian.
So, like, when you're watching Dazed and Confused or a Matthew McConaughey movie, it's Alvit.
Honestly, if you get the chance, there was a sitcom made in the 80s. It was about like a group of builders who go to work in Germany called Auf Wiedersehen Pet. And like Jimmy Neal's on there. He's like an actor from up there in the region.
Oh.
And honestly, sometimes you need subtitles to understand what he's saying.
My dad said that too. Said something similar like that to Jason Statham when he met him. I told you that story before we started the podcast. But I always think of the first time I watched Snatch by Guy Ritchie, and it wasn't for everybody else. It was for Brad Pitt, the American in the movie. I needed subtitles for him. It's kind of funny. You know, do you like Dax? Do you like Dax? Like, what is he saying? Ricky Simone. He's a boy. He's one of my boys, and new up and coming heavyweight contender. Apparently, he's got a lot of decisions, a lot of experience, but I don't know if the UFC fans are aware of him. But Andre Arlovski.
I've seen him on a couple of Apex prelims. Yeah.
Yeah, they say he was a champion somewhere. I don't know.
Some backyard, like regional promotion.
Yeah, he beat Tim Sylvia. Ooh, we love Arlovski here.
And the big rumor doing the rounds is that part of the reason why Arlovski's appearing on this card in particular is that this is going to be Andre's last fight, win or lose. So, as this could very well be the last time that we talk about Arlovski in detail on this preview show, what are your sort of standout Arlovski moments? What do you think people are going to be talking about and saying about him in, say, 3 or 4 years' time?
I think, I would hope that they would talk about, like, you know, he was a champion in the UFC. He left to go fight. Then he left to go fight Fedor, was still very competitive at the top level, and got knocked out. Had a streak of knockout losses, and then just climbs back. He climbs back. He shows up. He beats Brendan Schaub. And, you know, it's always fun. It's always nice to see. In a horrible fight, but he beats Brendan Schaub. Then he knocks out Frank Mir, and it's like, oh. Then he beats Travis Brown, and it's like, oh, you're fighting for a number one contender against Stipe Miocic, fighting for a title shot. Like, what a crazy turnaround that was. It's not the craziest ever. Robbie Lawler has the craziest one of all time, probably. But because he went from, like, a what if, like, story, missed potential, to a journeyman, to, oh, you're the top 5 welterweight ever, like, out of nowhere. But Arlovski, what a crazy comeback. And I hope he doesn't retire, because I personally think that he could be decisioning heavyweights in the Apex for the next 90 years.
Honestly,
doing the same thing he's always done.
Honestly, though, that would say more about the quality of the heavyweight division than it would about Arlovski. As impressive as it is, exactly. I mean, there's only, if you're beating like guys like Jake Collier, does it really mean that much?
No. There's a reason why people were defending us putting Fedor Krokop so high on the recent video. Is because it shows how bad current heavyweight is.
Like 20 years later, it is still the benchmark of heavyweight title fights.
Oh yeah, it's the best ever.
Best of all time. Yeah. I think when the UFC, I have to be honest, and I've said this for a while, and I always get a lot of like odd looks. One of the best heavyweight fights in UFC history, title fights, is Randy Couture Pedro Hizo.
That fight's amazing. Yeah. It's amazing. It's unbelievable. That was the best heavyweight fight ever before Krokop Fedor. Like, and it's not even close. You know, I mean, I'm a big fan, even though it's a little hard to watch. I really like that trilogy with Kane and Dos Santos, but because that third one starts off with like probably my favorite non-Vanderlei Silva stare down ever. You know, Dos Santos comes out to do his little thing, and Kane meets him in the middle. Like, oh, chills just thinking about it. And I also like Stipe DC 2. Stipe DC Ngannou with the story behind everything is very fun. But I don't think there's anything that still comes to that level of Fedor Krokov for me. Like, that's the best heavyweight fight just in general ever. The only one I can see getting close is maybe Mark Hunt, Bigfoot.
Which may very well be a topic for the retro review coming up. Just a little bit of a spoiler alert there.
I hope it's Roy Nelson, though.
Just because you just want the video to be the Battle of the Bellies. I mean, what could we do with the thumbnail for that if that wins?
I mean, a picture of my diminishing belly? I don't know. It would be really funny is you can just like do like the beard, like two bellies like staring each other down, and then like just a beard, like so you can know one of them's Roy Nelson. But isn't this? You said something earlier that this isn't. I thought I didn't know about Arlovsky. Michelle.
There are some rumors that this could be Michelle Waterson's last fight as well. Either through, I think she's on good terms with the UFC enough that they won't cut her. But I think it's very much one of those sort of situations where if it's a win or like a dignified loss, she may very well call it a day. That's just the rumors I've been hearing.
Man, she has the best women's fight of all time. And you could argue, I think, and this, I hope no one takes this the wrong way. Just, no, don't take this out of context. But her nickname, the Karate Hottie, is such a great nickname in the sense of you are going to get so many casuals to check you out fighting. Like, they're going to be like, the Karate Hottie? Well, I got to see this, bro. And then they watch her fight, and it's like, oh, hey, that could, you know, potentially make them a fan of women's MMA. Like, that's a good thing. Despite I know some people, I have an ex that hates not Michelle Watterson, but her nickname because she found it sexist. I was like, she gave it to herself. Like, what? Like, but you know, I'm not qualified to comment on that, so whatever. Yeah, greatest women's fight of all time. Second greatest women's fight of all time. Just almost sneezed there.
I know which one you're thinking about here. I know your sense of humour. So we move on to the main card itself now for all of the last minute fight replacements and moving the card around, chopping and changing, all that kind of thing. We come to the first fight that has remained in exactly the same position and intact with both fighters. It's Ian Garry who is going to be taking on Michael Venom Page, number 7 versus number 14. Now the betting odds for this one do have Ian Garry as a slight favourite. Now what is interesting in regards to this fight though was that it was often speculated that this fight was going to be taking place at UFC 304. And when you've got an English fighter in MVP, an Irish fighter in Ian Garry, makes perfect sense for both guys, don't need to travel that far. But Ian Garry desperately wanted to be on UFC 303, arguably because of the Conor McGregor connections. Has this backfired on Ian Garry? Would it have been better to maybe be part of that Manchester card coming up?
Yeah, I would have probably. But you know, at the same, we just mentioned this on the prelims, or you did specifically. How you if you want to get your name out there and be a star, like you can always tell who the UFC is looking to push based on their prelims. You can say the same thing for the main card, and why not? Like if I'm Ian Garry. And if I'm any fighter and I'm available in July or late June, as it were, for International Fight Week, I got to get on that card, you know? So obviously Ian Garry wanted to be there so he could be in the same presence as his man crush, Conor McGregor. I imagined he has a Hey Arnold-esque shrine like Helga had.
I will always approve of any Hey Arnold reference on the show.
Been watching clips, man. That show is still S tier. It's even better now as an adult. You know, like as a kid, I just was like, oh, I like the sound effects and I like the show. I like these characters. And as an adult, like you really get a chance to like really appreciate the writing and characters of it. It's I had no idea Helga's parents or Helga's mom was an alcoholic until I rewatched clips lately. I was like, oh, what? It blew my mind. But like oh, and his balloon-shaped foot, the glum. I'm gonna tell Frankenfoot that one because he loves Hey Arnold. But yeah, Ian Gary. I mean, I don't think you can lose being on this card. In terms of, I mean, obviously you wanted Colby Covington because he looked horrible against Leon, and you're like, I gotta strike while this iron is hot, and jump on this guy who normally would be a very bad stylistic matchup. But if he's still gun shy, like, oh, dude, he could run through him, you know? Because I would be real worried for, like, I don't know, man. Colby looks so bad, it kind of makes it hard to... I would have picked him to beat Ian Gary, but I would have had a lot more question marks around that than I normally would have. So I don't think you could lose. You're getting MVP, a guy the UFC hyped up like crazy. You could dethrone this because he came off a performance that was unbelievable performance against Kevin Holland. So, you know, I don't see this as a backfire at all, personally.
And you mentioned there that from all the reports I've heard, the original plan was for this to be Colby versus Ian Gary. And I think from both fighters, that makes a lot of sense. If Gary was to win, then Gary's beaten this sort of like former title challenger, sort of like one of the bigger names of the welterweight division over the past couple of years. So he can use that to jump forward, maybe into that sort of top 5 sort of title eliminator consideration. From Colby's perspective, if he was to turn back this highly touted prospect, he gets himself back into relevance. I think from the reports I've heard, it was Colby who turned down the fight. Gary seemed more than open to taking the fight. And for me, it just confirmed to me that Colby Covington, for me, is just no longer relevant as a welterweight contender, in my opinion. Maybe he hasn't been for a long time, but the nails have gone into the coffin, as it were.
I think he confirmed it this week that he did. And he was like, oh, he's not a big enough name. Why would I fight a no-name dork? Which I'm like, it's funny if it wasn't for the fact that, like, this guy is up and coming and talks a lot of crap. It's kind of hard to call someone a no-name dork if they're just spouting like crazy. Like, there's the old adage that the smallest dogs bark the most. I mean, someone's got to prove it to this guy at some point. You know, it's not like Shavkat. That guy's just perfect. That guy ain't losing anytime soon. I think personally, I think he's the only guy I got beating Leon currently. But
so we've gone from Jack Slack with your anti-Chev stuff to Luke Thomas now. He is big time Shavkat.
Dude, everyone's just ripping me off. I don't like this. I'm about to get a lawyer, dude. I'm about to get that lawyer that's suing Disney right now. We're going at him. Yeah, I'm very pro shot. Me and Luke Thomas see each other at the weekly convention for Shavkat fans. We're engineering this train all the way. This metaphor is falling apart. So,
shall we talk about Ian Gary in a bit more detail then? Yeah,
absolutely. So, please, let's move on.
The last time that we saw Ian Gary in the octagon, he claimed a split decision win over Jeff Neal, which was at UFC 298. 7 KOs, 1 submission. And alongside the Jeff Neal win, he also has wins over Neil Magny, Daniel Rodriguez, which in my opinion was probably his best performance in the cage. And then there's a couple of lower ranked names, Song Kenan, Gabe Green, Darian Weeks, who's a friend of the channel. There were a lot of people though who maybe gave Ian Gary a bit more criticism than expected after the Jeff Neal fight. Do you think that was warranted, or do you think here's a guy who some of the fans aren't really too keen on. He says a lot of obnoxious things. There's the stuff with his girlfriend as well, which sort of made the headlines. Do you think people were just trying to jump on a bandwagon and use this as an advantage to attack him? What was your opinion on Gary versus Neal?
I think it's, when it comes to trash talking, I think it's really, a no-go to bring family into this, unless, but I also believe in mutually assured destruction. So if I'm open with my past, I used to have a drinking problem. I have a DUI. If I was fighting and Ian Gary got my mugshot and put it on his shirt, it's like, well, I guess we're both going down, dude. Like, how old's your wife? Her husband lives. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's like the only time I can kind of justify that. To Jeff Neal's credit, my secret brother, Jeff Neal, he didn't. I don't think it was him that brought it up. It was more so fans and Sean Strickland, because of course, here comes Sean Strickland coming into. I want those two to fight on the same card so bad. You have no idea. I want Sean Strickland, Sean O'Malley, and Ian Gary to be on the same card, so bad. But just thinking about. I mean, because it's funny. Is it wrong to laugh at that situation? Probably. I'm gonna laugh though. I'm a horrible person. Probably. I don't know. It's really funny. But I mean, the whole thing with that. I mean, I don't think he looked very good against Jeff Neal. But I think Jeff Neal also fought. Funny enough, Jeff Neal probably fought a style that he himself isn't great at. Like this grindy, clinch-heavy kind of attack with random power punches. Like that isn't. We want Jeff Neal to let his hands go, and to eventually look for a big kick. And credit to Ian Gary, smart game plan. He did what he had to do to get the win against a guy like that. But Jeff Neal fought a much different style than he's normally fighting, and made Ian Gary not look great. Like I personally scored that fight for Jeff Neal. I can understand picking Ian Gary, kind of. I don't think it's a flat out robbery, but it's at least in my opinion, a pretty bad call, but not BS levels. Like it's not 49-46 Costa, I guess you could say. It's not that bad, but it's no giving Valentina the fight in the second Lex Grasso. It's my birthday, guys. My birthday was Sunday. I'm 30. I need things to hold on to in life. I don't know if I think everyone in the world saw me when I realized what I could say, and I had to try to bit my lip to try and stop me. It was always happening. But I mean, he's not a likable guy, and I think when you talk a lot of crap, it sadly opens yourself up to backlash. It just kind of sucks, I think, from a morality standpoint. Funny talking about morals when trash talk, but from a morality standpoint, it kind of sucks that we have to rag on him and his wife for their weird situation, because that's not cool. Like you have to because it brings his kid into it, which isn't like they didn't do nothing wrong, But I don't know. It's definitely a weird one, I don't necessarily like it. I won't be making those jokes. I'll just be laughing at them. Yeah, but I don't know if he's necessarily God's gift to Irish MMA again, like he claims he is. I think the Jeff Neal fight kind of opened a lot of eyes.
That's the feeling I get as well. Like, don't get me wrong. I think Ian Gary is very talented, and I think he's one of those guys who I could see him making into the top 5. I could see him possibly fighting for the belt, but I do think we are starting to near the top of his ceiling. There's a lot of things about his game which I do like. A lot of lateral movement, keeps his opponents at the end of the jab. Very good counter striker. And that's one of the things that, because he has fought grappling heavy opponents, but one of the things he did as a great deterrent was sort of keeping them at the end of his jab, and when they did come in for the takedowns, that's when he reacts and catches them with the big shot. I think that's one of his strong games. It is
Love his low
and the low
kicks.
kicks as well, which just completely hammer Neal Magny. I
Love
do
his low
think
kicks.
though that style of fighting though is quite high risk, because if you watch Ian Gary when he fights, it's nearly always when he's back against the cage. He's waiting for the shot. He's waiting for someone to come at him first. And it's working for him now 90% of the time. But you could just see a Dagestani wrestler seeing this guy with his back against the fence and he's diving for the leg straight away. So it works against certain type of opponents. Is it going to work when he's fighting like the Shavkats of the world? That's maybe where I do have a bit of a concern.
I think he's definitely I think his ceiling is definitely a lot higher than I initially said. I think I said a while ago, I thought like, like of the three big unbeaten guys at welterweight back when it was three of them, it was like Shavkat, Mike Malott, and Ian Gary. And I said Ian Gary's at the bottom of potential. Mike Malott's number 2. Then it's Shavkat at -1 because he's so much better than both of them. But hey man, prove me wrong, because after his debut, I thought, wow, this guy talks a lot of crap for a guy who was getting smoked on. Like he has the tall guy defense. His back's always to the cage. He's weirdly, it's hard to get in range to hit him. But when you do, he's hittable, which is kind of awkward to quantify and analyze, I think. But he's taken on a guy who is a master at hitting people.
And we'll talk about him now. Michael Venom Page, a 22-2 record. Now, he made his UFC debut just a week after Ian Gary's last fight. He fought Kevin Holland at UFC 299. And I think when any fighter comes from another major promotion, whether it's the PFL, whether it's Bellator, there's always a little bit of skepticism, dare I say a little bit of snobbery. Or this guy was fighting in the B leagues, how he's never going to achieve anything in the UFC because it's so much better than everywhere else. Did Michael Venom Page, did he raise the ceiling of what he can achieve with the Kevin Holland fight?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if that's just good matchmaking, giving him a guy like Kevin Holland in hindsight, or if he's just the man, or if Kevin Holland's worse than we thought. Because I picked Kevin Holland to win. Man, MVP made it look way too easy.
Yes.
Like, stunning.
Yeah.
Stunning.
And I think it maybe did knock, we actually mentioned this before, because Kevin Holland fought a 302. I think there was a lot of people that sort of gave up on Kevin Holland. Even as an action fighter, they just thought, is this guy really worth us investing our time in? Obviously, Kevin Holland bounced back in explosive fashion with his last fight, which was brutal to watch.
It was awesome.
But MVP comes into this fight with his stock quite high, in my opinion. And he's given a match against Ian Gary, which there's a lot of people that think this could be a real sort of striker's delight. I have to be honest, though, and I hope I'm wrong. I want to stress, I hope I'm wrong. And I have been wrong many times on this show. I've just got this awful feeling we could get a bit of a stalemate. I think we've got two guys who work best waiting for their opponent to make the first move. And neither is going to give way.
Oh, yeah.
It's okay, Joe. We'll let you off.
Sorry. Yeah.
Flu
bug
going around.
Didn't I? I'm just kidding. No, for me, it's I was trying not to laugh, and some spit went down the wrong pipe, admittingly. I don't know what's grosser. But I will say, this is why we're awesome together. It's the same idea. I think the exact same thing. I think, because one element of this fight that I look at when watching both of them is my MVP's been beaten by a low kick before, like by low kicks, and Douglas Lima had that wild KO on him. And Ian Gary has fantastic low kicks. To get hit with those kicks, like MVP probably in the back of his mind's like, I don't want that to happen. Because his style is very dependent on movement with a very bladed stance. So he's much more susceptible to the low kicks because of his, stance and style and everything. So, he doesn't, I don't know if he wants to play with that kind of venom So in his mind, he's probably not going to want to stand in front of of Gary at all. He's probably going to want to get in and get out. But he's obviously just better on whenever he's trying to get out. And Ian Gary, he wants to circle and be on the back foot and he wants to force mistakes to capitalize on. And I think that's a recipe for a not great fight at all. Admittingly, like I'm gonna watch it. I want to watch it, like I'm gonna be there, like, oh yeah. But I think the potential for it to not be great.
Because I've been burned a couple of times with these kind of matchups. And ironically, one of them was MVP, because he had this fight with Paul Daly. Everyone expected it to be this sort of like striking masterclass, big power puncher in Daly. And again, you just had two guys who were too spooked into making the first move. Or you look at Darren Till versus Wonderboy, another example.
Yeah. That was the fight I was going to bring up. Yeah, that was
so
the one I was thinking.
don't put British strikers in big, high-profile matchups.
Yeah, British MMA's biggest fight of all time.
It was awful.
It's awful. It's horrible. Like that fight's almost up there with, I think it's slightly not there, but it's up there with like the Ngannou, Derek Lewis, and Carla Esparza, Rose 2. Like
I will say though, I always defend Derek Lewis versus Francis Ngannou only for the commentary. The commentary for that fight is hilarious.
Amazing. I defend it because it's 3 rounds. It's not worse because it's 10 minutes shorter than the other ones. It can't be worse when you're, like a third of the length. I think so.
Luckily, Joe, I don't think we'll be covering Carla Esparza as a retro review topic over the coming years, so you won't have to cover that one. Yeah.
Hoping.
Speaking of hoping, we are hoping that we're wrong, and this fight does turn into a belter. One thing I will say before we move on to our next match, though, we often hear a lot of people speaking about how good Ian Gary's grappling is. He is married to a Machado. He's trained with shooter box before, so he does have some knowledge about submission games, takedowns. Could Michael Venom Page, given some of his limitations grappling, could he maybe use this as the opportunity to sort of like break out the wrestling boots?
That'd be awesome if he came out there, shot like a blast double, like Matt Hughes slammed MVP, and then just like Charles Oliveira'd him on top. Like that'd be kind of cool. I mean, admittingly, at that point I'd be like, oh wow, you're almost as good as Shavkat, almost, But admittingly, like I think his wife is like one of those like really big offshoots of the Machado family. Like she had a name, but not so much the lifestyle. I could be wrong though. It was so easy to make a joke there and I didn't. I'm proud of myself.
So you think
so proud of myself.
So you think it's more like a Nurmagomedov situation where if you live on the same street as Khabib, you get his surname?
Yeah, probably. I will say, from a jiu-jitsu background myself, everyone says Gracie this, Gracie that, Gracie this. No, the Machados have always been better. Like they're so much better at grappling. Like it's not even close. There's a Jean-Jacques Machado he's missing a hand. He's like I think it was a birth defect, and I personally think he would smoke Hickson in pure grappling. But he's also genuinely a really nice guy from all accounts. My uncle who trained me met him and was like, "Oh, brother, man, he's the coolest guy ever." My Uncle Tony is awesome. That could be its own Patreon series. Is like, all right, I'm gonna interview my Uncle Tony and just talk about like martial arts, like, and just that legitimately do gangbusters.
Honestly, I actually think that would be a really good idea because we're always looking for ideas for things to put on the Patreon page.
I legitimately would do that. I might actually ask me like, hey, would you be interested in this? And I also want to write his I also want to write his biography, help him with his autobiography, because people would demand it be put in the fiction section, and I would be like, no, I promise you, it's in the nonfiction. Like that guy has had such a crazy life, from telling Ken Shamrock, I hope you get knocked out tonight, to his face backstage at a UFC event to getting into multiple fights while sitting down in your car waiting for guys to walk up to your car window. Like, guy's got an incredible life.
Which way are you leaning with this match?
Man, I admittingly was going to pick Ian Gary, but I think MVP is probably better at getting in than Ian Gary is, and they're probably about equal at getting out and staying away. So I think that's where the fight is. I think MVP is going to probably, because MVP was countering a lot of low kicks from Douglas Lima. I could see he has had some experience with it, so he either has kind of been like, no, I hate this. This is horrible. I never want this to happen again. Or he knows what to do against it. Like, it's either one or the other here, potentially. So, I mean, he does have a really bad decision win against Douglas Lima, if I remember correctly. I don't remember if it was controversial or not, but I remember thinking it was. Yeah, I'm going to go MVP. I think MVP wins a decision that I'm going to complain about on the recap video.
I am going to be going for Gary. I think that, and the big one, and I know you shouldn't really take age into these kind of things, but Michael Venom Page is 37 years old, and while I don't think he's taken that much damage in his career, still seems quite fresh-faced, given his advancing years, there does come a point when the explosiveness goes away, and the movement goes away, and those are two of the big traits that MVP has, is his ability to just blast into these big power shots to catch his opponents off guard. I wonder how sort of prominent that's going to be at 37 years old. It seemed to show itself against Kevin Holland, but you can get old overnight. And I think Ian Gary has maybe a few more weapons. We know that he's got good footwork. I think he might be able to avoid some of the big power punches that MVP does try and throw. So I'm going to lean to Ian Gary. I'm going to lean a decision. But I don't think Gary's going to win over a lot of fans with this kind of fight. And I think we're going to have people saying, well, is this guy really as good as he thinks he is when he's getting these bad decisions, that kind of thing? Because that does happen. If you're a big talker, there's a big backlash if you don't live up to it.
If you talk big, you got to win big.
Exactly.
If you don't, you look stupid. I think you making the safe call. Is Ian Gary I'd imagine MVP's the favorite here, but Ian Gary probably should be the favorite here.
I believe Gary is a slight favorite.
Okay, then he should be. I think this fight's close. I mean, like I said, I really wanted to pick Ian Gary for this fight. That's when I said, like, hey, I'm going to shock you with a pick for one of these fights. And I was going to pick Ian Gary, but because everyone knows how I feel about the Ian Gary-esque fighter, you know, like the Connors, the Ian Gary's, there's someone else. John Jones, I guess. Recently, John Jones has been kind of like that. You know, Sean O'Malley, that was the one.
Yeah.
Everyone knows how I feel about guys like that. But I was going to pick him to win because, you know, admittingly, I think it looks better for him on paper. But thinking about it, I think MVP's not a bad choice either. And I don't know. I'll probably just go with him. Yeah. That's a hard one. That's a hard one to pick. Yeah. That kind of came down to personal feelings for me instead of analytical ones.
Just wait till we get to the main event.
Oh, man. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. I don't want to talk about that. I'm kidding. Yeah.
Fight number 2, and we are going to the women's bantamweight division, and it is Mayra Bueno Silva who is going to be taking on Macy Chasson. Number 3 versus number 7 in what many people consider the UFC's weakest weight class. We will be talking about its card placement because that has been a big contentious issue with this match. So the betting odds for this one, you can get MBS at minus 205. Macy comes in at plus 170. Now, there has been a lot of negativity around this fight being on the main card. And I have to be honest, in some cases, I am maybe a bit defensive of women's MMA to my detriment. But I think a lot of the criticisms that people have thrown at this fight have maybe been slightly unjustified. And I bring this up for 2 reasons. Number 1, I think that regardless of quality, and this is one of my sort of hotter takes, I think regardless of a fight's perceived quality, I think ranked fights should be getting higher billing when it comes to pay-per-views and fight night main cards. Because, like, if you look at, say, Cub Swanson versus Andre Fili, that on paper is a better fight than this. But Cub Swanson and Andre Fili aren't going to be fighting for a belt in 12 months' time. Whereas the winner of this fight could be fighting for a belt, or at least a title eliminator, to see who fights for the belt next after that. Especially if Macy wins, because she's a fresh face to the sort of top echelons of the division. But also as well, I saw a lot of comments in regards to this on Twitter, and one of the narratives was women's MMA is being forced on us against our wishes. So I did some research into this. So far, there's been 39 women's MMA fights which have taken place in the UFC. Only 7 of them have been on main cards, only 2 of them on pay-per-view main cards. And they were both title fights which get a higher placing by default. 33% of women's fights in the UFC have been Apex prelims. So that narrative doesn't really hold up when you look at the numbers.
I think a lot of that motif is, I'd be really curious to see if the nationality and where that guy's from who said that. Because currently in America, there's a very big culture war.
Is this a Caitlin Clark stuff?
No, that stuff's super interesting, but that's its own, like, can of worms. It's more like, funny enough, Star Wars lately has been the big thing. Because Star Wars, I argue, hasn't been good since Empire Strikes Back. That's my opinion. But Star Wars came out with a new show made by women, people of the LGBTQ community, and they're pushing a lot of their ideas onto this and changing lore. And that naturally upsets diehard fans. And the other thing is the show just isn't very good. It's not good at all. And so that makes it like more of a, like, see, they can't do anything right. And, oh, you're like, and I feel like it's creating I feel like that's having that culture war. Sadly, I knew it was going to happen, was going to bleed into our beloved MMA. These chicks should be on the main card.
I think from a rankings perspective, yes.
Yeah. In terms of entertainment value, oh no, it should be Cub Swanson, Andre Fili. Like, yeah. But in terms of entertainment value, what's this next fight doing on this card? Like, you know what I mean? Like, hold on. You know, I mean, if we're, as much as the UFC tries to change our minds about it, we're not we're more of a, this is a meritocracy. It should be, in theory. You know, I'm a basketball fan. One of the most dominant dynasties of all time was the San Antonio Spurs, with I think probably one of the best coaches in any, at least not the best, top 10 in any sport ever, was Greg Popovich. That team was so boring. Like, that team was really boring. I watched a Magic the Gathering video talking about something last night, and he brought up a team, I want to say it was a Dutch team, but they had to change the rules because after scoring a goal, they used to just kick it back to their goalkeeper and then have them reset and then rinse repeat over and over and just stall you out that way. And they were unbeatable with it, you know. It was a football team.
Well, they introduced the back pass rule in like 1992, I think, for that reason, to try and encourage more action.
Yeah, it was whatever there was a team that forced it basically because they were just incredible. I suppose, from what I understand. I should have remembered the name of it, but you know, at the end of the day, like, I can't really fault them for that, because if you're, you know, like, is this fight going to be good? I think it could be good. I think it could be pretty good, actually. But it's not. Is it going to be better than Andre Fili? Cub Swanson? No. Like, Cub Swanson on a card, I'm watching it. Like, that guy's, it's Cub Swanson, you know. But I hate this narrative that, I hate both sides of that coin of, like, they're forcing women on us. Like, it's like, no, we should be more worried that they're forcing bad fights on us, bad matchmaking on us.
But the other reason why we should go down the meritocracy route as well is I think it pays dividends further down the road, because I think about what happened when Mighty Mouse was flyweight champion. Like, a lot of the matches to sort of decide his title contenders, these sort of like title eliminators, they were taking place on like fight night prelims. And then 6 or 7 months down the line, when they booked that guy against Mighty Mouse, you had people coming out the woodwork saying, well, why should I care about this fight? I don't know who this person is. So you've got to give them some kind of pedestal.
10,000% agree. You're going to have guys who are like, who's Chris Cariaso? Who's John Moraga? You know, and it doesn't help at all. You know?
So
an example of this is definitely in our co-main event. One of the guys in there, all his fights have been on pay-per-view main cards. Oh, actually, at 300 it wasn't, but it might as well have been because of. Well, I think it kind of works because this guy's become a star. That guy's become a star. But we'll talk obviously more when we get there.
What we are going to talk about is Mayra Bueno Silva, so a 10-3-1 record. So some of her notable wins in the UFC: Lena Landsberg, Wu Yanan, Mara Romero Barella, Gillian Robertson back when the two fought at flyweight. There is the Holly Holm win as well, but that was turned to a no contest. So there's some question marks over whether or not you count that one.
I do.
But of course, the fight that she fought most recently was at UFC 297, her third title bid. We've talked about that fight many times before on the show, so we won't sort of labour the point too much. One thing I do want to ask you about that fight, though, because you will have probably watched it to prep for your notes. Looking back on it, do you see that as a fight Raquel Pennington won or a fight Mayra Silva lost? I was going to say I think you might have knocked your mic off.
I was muted because I was burping. And it's funny I didn't unmute it. So I actually considered that a Rocky win. I could understand someone saying it's an MPS loss over a Rocky win, but here's why I say Rocky win. MBS gassed out. We called it exactly, you know? But Rocky was getting whooped on a little bit. It's really easy to belly up. You go belly up and just give up, even if your opponent's gassed out now. You have to seize the opportunity and, like, hey, there's an opening. I got to take it. And she took it, and she won, like, because of it. So I think her taking that opportunity, you know, I don't think it's a case of, you know, like someone getting overconfident and leaving their chin in the air, throwing just big random shots with your hands down. I don't consider it a situation where, you know, you throw foul after foul and get yourself disqualified. Like in situations like that, someone lost the fight, not someone didn't win the fight necessarily. But no, I think Rocky won that fight personally.
I think you can make an argument for Mayra losing it. I think there were two big things that really stood out for me in terms of Mayra's performance. Was I don't think she had much respect for what Rocky could come back at her with, because like you've got to remember, like Mayra wins the first round fairly comfortably, and I think she's winning the first half of the second.
Yeah, she's winning most of the second.
Yeah. Rocky catches her with that big 1-2, starts charging forward, and that was the moment I feel Mayra thought, oh, I need to give this girl a little bit more respect. And then, of course, there was, I think because she underestimated Rocky and just thought, I'm just going to take this girl down and submit her straight away, I don't think she prepped for 5 rounds. And
I don't think she's ever had the cardio issues, though.
No, that's the sort of counter-argument.
Yeah.
Because she went 3 rounds against Manon Fiorot, which was at a low weight class, so you'd think the gas tank would maybe be a bit worse. And she didn't show any signs of slowing down there.
No. I think she just blew. You called it the adrenaline dump.
Yes.
Kind of the thing, because it was her first time under the big bright lights, and we see it all the time. You know, the adrenaline dump. It's the only dump in MMA we like.
Not the Justin Kish type.
Oh yeah, not that. The only dumps in MMA we like is adrenaline dumps, or if you had a Y to it. Michelle Watterson, anyone? No,
Norma Dumont.
Oh my God. She's too respected. to be on the list. So I'm stuck with Vanessa Demopoulos, but Norma Dumont it's just too obvious if I say her on my boys list, boys stable. If I say Norma Dumont, why? Start sweating, get the.
Let's try and keep this PG, Joe.
No, it's mostly I don't want to get pressured. Nothing too gross. I'd be afraid of having to explain it. But yeah, I think MBS had an adrenaline dump. Now I'm thinking of the Justine Kish one. That was in Oklahoma. It was in my hometown. But MBS definitely. I can kind of see what you're saying, that it's her losing. I think it's a Rocky one. I think it takes someone to. You have to grab that opportunity, I think, in the fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely. I'm definitely glad you brought this up, because shameless plug on Uncaged later, I have an interesting topic that's similar to that. I have to get your opinion on.
And I'm certainly looking forward to it. And if you do donate to the Patreon page, that will be available to all of our subscribers there. Just a little bit of a Brucey bonus, a little bit of a thank you for your continued support, because we really do appreciate it at this time of the year. It's quite ironic that we're talking about Raquel Pennington as well, because Myra's opponent is someone who has also fought Rocky, which is Macy Chasson, a 9-3 record. In her last fight, she claimed a second win over Pani Kianzad, which was in March 2024 it was definitely an Apex card. I think it was Tuivasa Tabura.
I think so too.
Yeah. So 2 KOs, 3 submissions, and along with the 2 Pani wins, we also have a win over Norma Dumont. And then some of the lesser names in the division: Sarah Morris, Gina Mazzani, Marion Renault when she was on that downturn. And I will say, I'm not expecting this fight to be a masterpiece by any means. And I do understand some people who maybe think this isn't really worth getting invested in. I will say, though, if you were to look at both fighters and sort of generalize them, aggressive grapplers who like going forward, sometimes prone to making mistakes due to their eagerness to get the fight to the mat. You could apply that to Myra. You can also apply that to Macy. I think these matchmaking for this is actually very, very good.
I think they're going to meet in the middle, which I think is one of two things. We could get a really fast-paced, great fight, or we get a clinch fest where both people are kind of, because when you meet in the middle, two people want to come in and go just right at it. They typically collide and clinch up. And if that's the case, you got MBS trying to take Macy down from the clinch, and Macy's going to try and elbow a knee in the clinch. So I think that still could be kind of fun.
I think so as well. And also you got the stylistic difference where Myra's a little bit bulky, likes to sort of get inside in the pocket, whereas Macy's a longer, taller fighter for the weight class, likes to stay on the outside. I've always been of the belief, that Macy Chasson might be the most underrated fighter in this weight class.
She's got so much potential that I'm ready for her to turn that corner. Every fight I feel like I go, is this the time she turns that corner and just explodes into unbeatable territory? Because I feel like with her, you're either unbeatable or you're still working at it. And I'm ready for her to turn that corner.
There is still a lot of greenness to her game, but that comes with fighting more often, and she does seem to be doing so these past couple of months. Because she was inactive for a long time. A lot of bad luck on that part, but I've always been quite high on her. Even back when she won tough, I thought, if you refine this girl, you do have something that you can certainly work with. Because a lot of people think...
She ran through everybody.
She did. I mean, she beat Pacheco 1 round, and we've seen what Larissa's done.
Yeah. I mean, technically, MMA math works. Better than Kayla Harrison.
might be seeing that fight in a couple of years' time. You never know.
Actually, genuinely, you could. That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah. And also as well, yes, she's lost 3 times. Now, one of those was an early career loss to Lena Landsberg. And the other 2, Irene Aldana, which was a fight Macy was winning before the strangest KO of all time.
Yeah.
And I thought she was beating Rocky Pennington. before she got too eager and then got caught in a guillotine.
Yeah, I thought she was beating both of them. I love the Aldana one because Aldana legitimately is... She's, like, really confused at what happened. And she, like, looks around, and then they go, you won, and she's like, what do I do? Just play it off. Like, say that you planned it. Oh, yeah, I planned it. Yeah, like, awesome. But it's so funny. That's a weird one. I remember, like, watching it live going, what? Was this the phantom up kick? And you see it just clobber, and I'm like, oh, that's unlucky. That's really unlucky.
I think in my opinion, I could just hear the squeaking of your chair there.
Yeah. I went, that was the chair.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're not a big budget production here, so unfortunately we can't get all the soundproofing and that kind of thing. We're not Luke and Brian at this moment in time, I'm afraid.
We're them in quality. No, I wish, but... I'm a pretty good Brian Campbell, though.
I think so.
Yeah.
That is a compliment. That is a legitimate compliment.
Yeah,
I think that Brian brings out a lot of the sort of fun in Luke.
Yeah.
And Luke sort of reins in Brian, maybe going off tangent a little bit.
That's literally our dynamic. It's pretty close to ours.
So
But you're more fun than Luke. You're more fun than Luke, I will say.
Yeah. I think there's 3 areas, in my opinion, when it comes to breaking down a fight. When it comes to striking, the clinch, and the ground game. I think when it comes to the striking, I would lean towards Macy. I think she's made big improvements in her footwork. Myra does seem to have a tendency to just sort of keep pushing forward, just throwing these big haymakers, which they do have power. We saw her hurt Holly before she got the submission. But it's going to be very hard to try and hit a moving target. So I think maybe on that side of things, I would favour Macy to maybe avoid some of the bigger shots. The clinch work, I give it towards Macy as well. And I think she is going to be hammering Myra's body. I think she's going to see what happened to Myra against Rocky and think maybe she does have some cardio issues. And then try and hammer it, throwing in some knees. I thought she did that against Renault. And that was a very good performance from her. She really attacked the body in the clinch. I don't think Macy's that good at actually getting the fight to the mat, though. And that's a concern for me. And I also think as well, if you look at a lot of Myra's submissions, they're all limb-based. And a lanky opponent like Macy is going to be more vulnerable to Myra dropping to try and go for a knee lock or an arm bar. Whereas Macy's a lot more sort of choke-based in her submissions. So I'd maybe give Myra the edge when it comes to the submission game.
I will say it's a lot easier to take down the taller, lankier person. Like, it's just naturally a lot easier. I think I kind of look at this and I have to think about like how the fight plays out. I think when they are clinched up, I think those knees to the body are just kind of come raining in. And I think that's why I also am leaning towards Macy. Oh, funny. How do you feel about MBS? She took on Rocky, who was in your, she was in your stable for a long time. Then Rocky wins. You graduate Rocky. You told me that you're thinking about, bringing Macy into the stable, and here MBS is fighting your next last.
I'm in 2 minds over whether or not I include Macy, because Macy does have some sort. I think you've got to have a real sort of. There has to be a real embarrassment in admitting that you're a fan of someone.
The Aldana fight.
True. But I'm thinking more sort of like Eileen Perez. Like, Eileen Perez is a proper gal.
Justine Kish.
Well, Kish did beat Ansaroff, so that's a tick in her box.
She's looking more and more the better prospect every day.
Which way are you leaning with this one, Joe?
I'm going to go Macy by decision. I could see her getting a late finish, but no, I think it's going to be because Macy is a finisher, But I'm going to say decision. Yeah. And I'm hoping this is the time we see Macy turn that corner and really explode.
I hope so as well. And I think if you were going for a fight that's more capable of finishing the fight, you would go with Myra.
Yes.
But I think there's good value for money in going for Macy at plus 170. So I would maybe lean towards that line. There's two things I do want to point out, though, before we move on to the main fight. Firstly, I hope this fight does deliver, and it does answer the critics who are questioning whether or not this should be on the main card. But also, as well, isn't it refreshing that finally we've got two fighters around title contention, squaring off in this sort of potential title eliminator sort of asterisk, who were both sort of like post-Ronda? Because the big issue this weight class has always had is that it hasn't had the new talent coming through. Now we finally seem to have it. I mean, talent compared to bantamweight standards.
I look at it like this. We're finally out of the shadows, because the Lioness is gone. We can finally have new talent that we can get behind and be like, oh, they're not just going to lose to Amanda Nunes. It's like Scar. She's a lioness, It's like Scar has left Pride Rock. But Simba didn't beat her.
Scar just sort of like, I can't be bothered anymore.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go.
Yeah, it turns out if Simba trained more in Wine Mom boxing, he would have had a better chance.
Does this make Ronda Mufasa? I'm just picturing Rocky walking up a cliff and then just saying, remember.
I like to think Ronda is Rafiki. I don't know why. That sounds kind of funny to me. No, Ronda would definitely be Mufasa. Rafiki would be
Dana White.
That sounds so funny. That sounds so funny. Dana White and Sean Shelby, they're Timon and Pumbaa.
I was going to say DC and Dominic Cruz.
Oh my God, they're perfect for Timon and Pumbaa. Oh man. That sounds awesome. Zazu is probably Dana White, actually. Because it never seemed like... If Cyborg had the big run, then Zazu would have been Dana White, actually. Because we all know Dana's feelings towards Cyborg. Like, I've got a lovely bunch of coconuts. No. Don't. I hate that song. We've done the Lion King since before, and it never gets old.
I am getting an editor to splice this into a short. You realize that, don't you?
Perfect.
So, it's good thing you're talking about lions, because we've got Lionheart coming up here. Anthony Smith is back in action, taking on another short notice call from the UFC.
It's funny you say this, because I actually have a really big news, guys. This is huge. As we know, been pushing for the matchmaking job in the UFC, and they told me they're giving me a shot. I pitched Roman Dolidze versus a lion. They said the best we could do was a lion heart, and I said, well, I'll take it.
Yes, he is going to be taking on Roman Dolidze here. It is a light heavyweight bout, and it is one of the most convoluted methods that we actually got to this fight. So, sit back, ladies and gentlemen. I am going to tell you a tale which is going to take a lot longer than it should. So, originally, this fight was supposed to be Jamal Hill versus Khalil Roundtree, which sounds like a fantastic fight. Good two strikers. Khalil potentially with the opportunity to break into the top 5. Unfortunately, he had to pull out. He got caught for steroids. Carlos Ulberg stepped in to face Khalil. Then Jamal Hill pulled out and was replaced by Anthony Smith. And now Roman Dolidze is replacing Carlos Ulberg. So this is officially the Triggers Broom of MMA fights.
It's so funny. This reminds me of, I think it was Chris Clements and Matt Riddle back on the godforsaken card that was Hector Lombard, Tim Bosch, Uriah Faber versus Hindenbrow 1. I think it's 112.
149.
No, yeah. I was like, no, 112 that's something else. Yeah. That card, horrible. But it's really funny when you think about it, because I think that fight at one point originated as Yoshihiro Akiyama versus Thiago Alves. And like 7 people stepped in and got replaced at one point. And we got stuck with Matt Riddle, Chris Clements at one point. Like, it's so funny how a fight can get made between two people who had nothing to do with each other for a minute ago. It's so weird.
The only one that comes to mind for me that I can think of which is close, I think Glover was supposed to fight Jimmy Manoir. And then with all the pullouts, it ended up turning into Thiago Santos versus Eric Anders.
That's really funny too. That's a pretty funny one.
And that actually turned out to be a pretty good fight, actually.
It's fun because Thiago Santos is really fun. I like him. Or at that time, he was amazing. He's so much fun. And Eric Anders, underrated fun.
Yeah. So Roman Dolidze is taking this fight on a week's notice. Now he is coming into this fight off a two-loss fight streak. So he lost against Marvin Vettori, which I thought was a very close fight. You could maybe make an argument that Dolidze won that fight. And then he has the loss against Imarvov recently, which was fairly one-sided, unfortunately, from his part. Is moving to light heavyweight a permanent move for Dolidze? Or is this just, will he go back to 185 and try and pursue his ventures there? 35 years old, maybe found his ceiling at 185. Maybe he might be worth taking a chance. Because we know that this division's sparse when it comes to title threats.
If he wins, he's staying. I think he's just doing a favor. I think if he loses, he's hopefully not cut. Because they always say the big 3 straight. But hopefully that doesn't work out for him. All jokes aside, that would be horrible to do the favor for the UFC. And then they cut you for it. Come on. I think that if he wins, he's probably staying. And if he loses, he's probably going back down, I would imagine. I mean, I think we've seen his ceiling. Imavov definitely, took care of him pretty well. But, for some reason he was going to fight Fluffy Hernandez on this
That would
card.
have been a great fight.
That fight would have been amazing.
I love Fluffy. Fluffy is such a dark horse in this division.
That's my one problem with it is what are we doing having Fluffy Hernandez fight Roman Dolidze, who's on a 2-fight losing streak? I would give Fluffy something crazy like Chris Curtis, actually. Oh man. Chris
Curtis ain't fighting anytime soon after that injury.
Oh yeah, he got injured. That's right.
It would be ironic as well if Dolidze was to stick around, because you could argue that Anthony Smith's sort of late career revival came from being a middleweight that found his ceiling, started taking light heavyweight fights on the whim, and then a year later is fighting for the title. He started KOing old people. Basically, Pua Shogun, Pua Rashad.
In fairness to him, there's a running gag in my household that we always say, and this is a joke, I don't mean it. I can't vouch for the other. We always say, Anthony Smith sucks. He doesn't. He's good. He's actually really good. Because after the Jones fight, which he got for knocking out Shogun, what's going on? What do they do to deserve this?
I think he submitted Volkan.
Well, yeah, it was after that was Volkan and Alexander Gustafsson back when they both were awesome. So it was no, he's a legit guy. That almost proves no, he's the man. He's really good. And then the Glover fight happened and it ruined him, I think. I think that ruined him. I don't know. I've never been in a situation where I have to hand my teeth to someone else while I'm getting beat up. Just wow. I feel bad. I feel bad for him. That changes everything.
It's strange watching Anthony Smith in the fights after that as well, because I think Anthony Smith actually has really good survival skills. But it's that stage before then, because it's almost he'll do well in the stand-up, get hit with something big, and then there's this moment of fear of, oh God, what's happening here? I don't like this. And then turtle up onto his back. But when he's down there, he is able to take a lot of punishment and just sort of hold out to survive the round. We saw that against Ryan Spann, which was a much closer, which was a very close fight actually. I think it was on the Singapore card.
I think so too.
Yeah. I made a joke. I think it was 261. It was the first COVID fight, first card after COVID. And I remember asking John when he was doing the show, is Anthony Smith actually good? Because I honestly still don't know.
I think that's fair, I mean, I think that's a fair. I remember him from the Strikeforce days when he fought. I think it was
Sayers?
was it not Ryan Gracie? Who was the Gracie that came over? From
It wasn't Ryan. It was it wasn't Hodger.
It was Hodger.
Oh, it was Hodger. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Hodger. And I remember him saying like, "No, I'm just gonna go in there and knock Hodger out. I don't care," or something like that. He was confident, not being a dick, but he was just confident in himself. And he got smoked. I remember going like, and then the UFC didn't keep him whenever everybody came over from Strikeforce. UFC didn't keep him. I was like, yeah, this guy might suck. Then I saw him come back, and I was like, I remember this guy. Yeah. And it wasn't until he knocked out, what's his face, Hector Lombard that I went, maybe this guy's pretty good.
The size difference in that fight's comical.
It's hilarious.
Like,
I don't know what they were
how
thinking.
Anthony Smith made 185, I do not know.
Yeah, and he was there for a long time. Like, to the point where, like, you almost forget that he was a 185er for a majority of his career, and then you go, like, wait, that's a 205 now? And he looks pretty big? What? Like, what is this magic called weight cutting, and why should we should stop it?
So, we haven't had much time, obviously, given the short notice, to sort of think about how each fighter would sort of integrate with one another, where we do have something which maybe could produce like an entertaining fight. In general, though, what would you say are Anthony Smith's best weapons?
I always think of, like, he's got, like, his striking solid. He has a lot of power, funny enough. He does hit hard. He'll strike with all 8 venoms, elbows, knees, punches, kicks. But I think in, like, nowadays, funny enough, I think a lot of people think of his grappling because there's, like, the Devin Clark thing where he's, doing pretty well against Devin Clark. Devin Clark takes him down. He just triangle chokes him. He choked out Ryan Spann. He, last fight, he won by guillotine after getting hurt. And the dude goes for a takedown, and he just guillotines him. And so, last month, actually, funny enough, I always forget it was like that long ago. Not that long ago. He's actually got pretty good submissions. He's well-rounded. Like, he kind of comes across to me as a good hand right now. Like, he's a good hand. Like, he can do anything. He's not world class at I think in anything, but he can take you down. He can wrestle with you. He can grapple with you, and he can strike with you.
So are you saying that Anthony Smith is the Val Venus of MMA?
I almost said that exactly verbatim, and I went, I don't want to think about the big Smith Boski. So
I just picture a post-fight interview Anthony Smith. Hello, ladies.
He's Farnsworth Jr. He can't be Val Venus. He's Farnsworth Jr., and nothing will ever change that for me. He looks so much like him. It's like separated at birth.
One thing that stands out for me with Anthony Smith, if I had to choose like an X factor, as it were, of all the sort of like, especially in his weight class, he throws a lot more elbows, I think, than a lot of his peers.
Standing elbows too.
Yes.
I love. Yeah. I like that.
I am curious to see how he handles
him and like Johnny Walker, like the guys who throw standing elbows at that big of a size difference.
Well, Johnny Walker will throw anything. He's that kind of fighter.
Yeah, even his own shoulder out.
Like, honestly, if he goes for like a cartwheel kick against Volkan tonight, like, that's the kind of person that Johnny Walker is. You can picture him doing it. Didn't Tim Elliott do that in one fight?
Yeah, Tim Elliott. Back in the day, it was Brian Ebersol. Threw one against Chris Lytle and knocked him down with it. Yeah, it was awesome.
It's a good thing you did mention Smith's grappling, though, because I think that's the big X factor of Delete here. Because, again, another guy who's fairly solid when it comes to his striking. He used to fight at 205 as well.
Oh, okay. So this isn't new for him.
This isn't new for him. He definitely, if I had to see a difference between his light heavyweight fights and his middleweight fights, a lot more kick heavy at 205, so that's maybe something to look out for. Bearing in mind Smith does have issues checking his kicks. The big thing for me, though, is his grappling and his use of leg entanglements to change position and to catch his opponents in, positions they're not used to. Like, the big one that stands out for me, Jack Hermansson.
I almost said I dropped a bomb just thinking about it. Like, yeah, it's horrifying. I curse like a sailor, and I had to stop myself. I literally felt it coming out, and yeah, that's a terrifying one. What he did to Jack Hermansson. Like, as a grappler myself, I felt my knees ache, and then realized I would also be eating ground and pound, and I'm like, no, none of that. He's a really good grappler. It's funny with a guy his size, and like, he fights almost like how Paul Craig should fight based on how he looks. Funny enough, I think is a decent way of explaining it.
So as a short notice fighter who's maybe going to be a bit undersized in this matchup, where do you think is the best place for Delitse to take this fight? Is he going to try and engage on the grappling side of things with Smith, bearing in mind that Smith's going to be a little bit bigger? Is he going to just try and make this a straight kickboxing match? What's his best approach, do you think?
Funny, Anthony Smith was prepping for a kickboxer. So, like, he was prepping for Karl Solberg, who trains at City Kickboxing. So if I'm Delitse, I'm like, well, what if I just take him down? Like, I wonder if he's like ready. How much reps has he been doing on the mat? And that's something I kind of think about. I think Delitse also. It's funny, the guy coming up from middleweight in my brain is bigger for some reason. I don't know, but that's because Delitse is just a bigger guy. He's a bigger guy at middleweight, you know what I mean? But in my head, I feel like he's going to be bigger to like muscle Anthony Smith around. I think for Delitse, it's you kind of have to pin him down, because I can see Smith getting on his bicycle, throwing kicks and jabs out, and making Delitse work for everything, while occasionally saying, "You're trying to hurt my family."
What?
Well, it's one of my favorites of all time. You're trying to hurt my family.
It's how genuinely confused Johnny Walker is.
That makes it, because it's just like a weird moment that like happens, and we all understand what he's doing, but Johnny Walker is such a cartoon character brought to life that it kills me. Like, where are you? The desert? Like, you're not wrong. Like, still one of my favorite moments of him. Like,
so we'll have to try and speed this up a little bit. Who are you going with this one?
I got Anthony Smith. I think a smart pick might be Delitse, but I think I'm gonna go with Anthony Smith here. I've made fun of him a lot this week in my home because of the running gag of Anthony Smith sucks. Anytime Anthony Smith gets close to fighting, it just ramps up for us as our gag. And admittingly, I am picking him to win though.
I would go with the safe option with Anthony Smith, but I think the best way to put this is a losable fight for Anthony Smith.
Very.
It's very. You've always got to be very careful when putting bets on him. It's just he's that kind of fighter. He fights to the level of his opponent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, it's because like I think of the Devin Clark fight, he didn't look great until he submitted him.
Well,
that's like a weird thing to think about.
Fingers crossed that this fight does live up and both fighters look good against one another. This core main event time, a featherweight bout here. It is Brian Ortega who is taking on Diego Lopes. You can get Lopes, who is the favourite here, at -140. Brian Ortega comes in at +120. First off, we usually don't praise the UFC all that much on this show. We do lean on the cynical side when it comes to things like this, but great matchmaking from them, because this is a really eagerly anticipated match. Both guys who very similar to one another in terms of the way they fight. And in the case of Diego Lopes, a guy with a ton of momentum.
I was hoping this fight was going to get made before they announced it. I was hoping that this would like get the full treatment and all that. But it's one of those fights that, do I want full camps for this? Yeah. Do I care? No. I just want to see these guys fight. Like, this sounds so much fun. Because they fight a lot alike. Diego Lopes might have more like pure power and probably tighter striking, but when this fight hits the ground, it is going to be a masterpiece of just scramble fests.
Do you think the UFC always had this match in mind? Because from the stories I've heard, I think Diego Lopes was penciled in for the Sphere card, and reportedly, so was Brian Ortega. He said, I was expecting to come back around sort of September, August time. So I kind of get the feeling this fight was always planned. They've just moved it forward a couple of weeks.
I think so too. I heard Arnold Allen at one point for Lopes, but I don't really believe that personally. I think after the height of the Sadiq Youssef win, I think they were like, this guy's got 3 wins in like less than a total of like maybe a minute and a half. It's like, we got to push him. Because it's funny with his haircut. He reminds me of a much more promising Eric Silva.
I can see where you're coming from there.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Eric Silva now that I think about it. But like Eric Silva, I'm fully invested into buying this hype.
We also have a very strange situation as well, because we've got number 3 versus number 14.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah.
So we could have a situation where Diego Lopes loses to Movsar Evloev.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, in a year's time, jumps him in the rankings and is closer to a title fight than he is.
It's kind of funny. I think it was a recap recently where I like kind of ranted about this whole thing.
Yeah.
Where I was like this boring equal like bad, like, kind of thing. And Diego Lopes, I like him more than Evloev. Evloev had his own Kevin Owens, Chris Jericho WrestleMania moment where Dana White's like, that's the worst match in UFC history. I
legitimately think Dana White got 2 fights mixed up. I legitimately think that.
Yeah. Well, there was another fight on that card that was worse, wasn't there? Like, there was a fight that was horrid on that card, whereas, like, the Evloev-Arnold fight's fine.
It's okay. It's the best fight on the main card.
That's funny.
Because Curtis versus Barrio wasn't very good. And Malott versus Magny was ho-hum until Malott collapsed.
Yeah, that made it better. Yeah. He had to have gotten fights confused, which is even funnier.
What was the old saying I was thinking of? Because we'll talk about this again when we come to the main event, but there seems to be a big issue with meritocracy in the UFC.
Yeah. It's
all like on whose line is it anyway? Like where the rankings are made up and the points don't matter.
Basically. I mean, I think I want to see Diego Lopes and Evloev go at it again with like full camps.
Yes.
Because Lopes made Evloev really work for it, despite the super short notice thing. Got hired in on like a week, and then comes in and blows everybody away. Like, that's honestly awesome. And funny, he's much more experienced than Brian Ortega.
Yes. So we're looking at his 31st fight here.
Yeah. And Brian Ortega, who is the epitome of a California Chicano, like with his blue eyes and Mexican heritage, very, very blood in and blood out-esque.
So we're going to dissect the fight in a bit more detail here. So we'll start by talking about Brian Ortega. Now, this is going to be the first time that Brian Ortega has fought twice in a year since 2018. So this is how unprecedented it is to actually see him not only fighting again, but also fighting, 5 months after his last fight, which was Yair Rodriguez.
Yeah.
So when a lot of people talk about Brian Ortega, they usually think of his grappling. And in particular, I think the big strength that Brian Ortega has always had I know he has the nickname T-City because of his sort of like...
Triangle.
Because of the triangles. I actually think one of his biggest strengths is recognizing when the head is in danger. Because a lot of the time, a lot of the big submissions he goes for are choke-based. We saw that when he sort of like jumped on that guillotine against Volkanovski. He caught Cub Swanson twice doing exactly the same thing. And it got him like a standing front choke. That to me is his biggest strength. Whereas Diego's a lot more sort of arm-based. It's very similar actually to Maida versus Macy.
Yeah.
Like one which is more sort of like arm and limb-based and the other which is head. That sounds so dodgy listening to it back now.
No, I thought of Diego Lopes and Macy have the same haircut.
They do.
They have the same haircut. Like, actually, wow. And also, too good matchmaking. We hate giving the UFC credit. So, edit that out, that we thought this was good. It's funny. I got really curious because when you said T-City, looking here, he only has like 3 wins like by triangle, but he has like 4 or 5 with guillotine. Because I always think of guillotine with him. Like, I don't think of the triangle choke. I just know T-City is Triangle City. He goes for it a lot, so maybe that's where it comes from. But I always think of him as the guillotine guy because his guillotine on Cub Swanson when he finishes him,
I love that.
Is horrifying. It's terrifying. And
that was the big breakout moment for him as well.
Yeah. Because I think that was after Cub Swanson had the Korean Superboy fight.
I believe so, yes.
So he was riding that high. And then here comes this. Like, jeez. That's crazy. First time fighting twice in a year since 2018 when he lost to Max. Wow. But then he had that huge break, comes back during COVID, and shows up and somehow beats the Korean Zombie.
And that was one of his best performances because he didn't, if I remember correctly, I don't think he used any grappling. It was just purely a striking match. And it does bring me on to the next point. A lot of people try and frame Brian Ortega as, yes, fantastic grappler, but just gets pieced apart on the feet. I actually think his striking fundamentals and his offense as a striker is actually very good. Yeah. I mean, especially when it comes to his counters. He can see when somebody's coming in and he knows how to quickly react and land those big shots. Like, obviously, that was where he finished Frankie. Frankie was having a lot of success early on. Then comes the counter. Frankie's rocked. Doesn't dare want to take it to the ground because he knows how good Brian is there. Is forced to stand and then gets the finish.
Yeah.
The issue is the striking defense.
I mean, he got that big lesson when Max Holloway was literally coaching him in the fight. Like, still blows my mind that happened. Like, still think about that sometimes. But Max literally was coaching him how to like, no, you should punch like this. This will help you out. Like, what? Dude, you're fighting this guy. Don't help him. Like, it's amazing. He's very hittable. He's very hittable, though.
Yep, and that raises some concerns, given how confident Diego Lopes has gotten with his hands recently.
Terrifyingly confident. I thought Sadiq Youssef was going to be like, oh, Diego Lopes has power, so he could hurt him on the feet. But obviously this is a striker-grappler match. Oh, no, he's just knocking him around like it's nothing. Cool. Like, that blew my mind. I picked Lopes to win, but I did not think it'd be like that.
And as well as that, we've also got the win over Pat Sabatini, which is very quick into that match. A flying triangle against Gavin Tucker. It's ironic that on the whole, the fan base and the UFC, they often lean towards strikers and knockout artists, and yet he is a guy who sort of made his name as a grappler, who just seems to have won over so many fans. I find that really fascinating.
He's a lot of fun, you know. I think a lot of it is like who sees like. I think a lot of it's pace, you know. I think we naturally associate a slower pace with grapplers, and we associate higher pace with strikers. And as fans, we want the fast-paced, crazy action. You know, I won't say exactly what yet, But in an event I watched recently, there was a lot of times where fights just had a really fast pace that were going to like the ground and then back on the feet and then back and forth, boom, boom, boom. That were really good fights because of the pace is what it was like really getting you going. It didn't matter where, if it was grappling or striking. So I feel like because he's a very high output, fast paced guy, I feel like that's got to play into it.
Yeah. So obviously the only loss that Diego Lopes has had in the UFC was against Evloev, but there's also been 5 more outside on the regional scene. Having watched some of those fights to try and get a gauge of him, what did Evloev, Joanderson Brito on Dana White's Contender Series, what did they do to neutralize Diego that maybe Brian Ortega can take on board?
I mean, with the Evloev, I remember, I don't remember the Joanderson Brito fight, but I remember the Evloev fight where Evloev just kind of survived this nightmare of grappling going at him, you know, like because he would take Lopes down. Lopes would scramble. He would try and change positions, grab a limb, try and get something going, and it was kind of like, to you overuse the term, a very like back and forth grappling brawl in a sense. And like but Evloev, you know, he had the cardio. He had enough to pin him down and control him on the ground. In that fight, like he managed to avoid all the bear traps being set in the grappling to carefully navigate the ground to contain him, which got easier the longer the fight went. But I don't know if Brian Ortega is that kind of guy to be able to just take him down and grind on.
Yeah,
him.
he's not in lane prayer. Yeah,
he's not going to do that. That's not what they do in the hood, even though he wasn't from the suburbs. He's from the suburbs. He's a suburban rich kid. It's always funny when he talks about his hood and like being hard and stuff. And I always go, dude, you're from the suburbs. Like, your parents were rich.
It reminds me of when GR and Paul Heyman were on commentary in the WWE, and Heyman would mention how he's from like the streets of New York. You're from Scarsdale.
That's awesome.
Which way are you leaning to this one?
I got Diego Lopes. Brian Ortega, notoriously hard-headed man. It took a UFC record to finish him, and it took his shoulder exploding. Those are the 2 times he's been finished. I mean, I think you could argue that they should have stopped the fight at one point in the in the Volkanovski fight. On the Yair fight too, potentially, but the Volkanovski fight more so, because everyone talks about how great round 3 is. I think it is when he gets Volkanovski throwing a kick, it gets caught, and escapes the guillotine, escapes the triangle. Everybody forgets what happens at the end of the fight, or at the end of that round, though, where it's Volkanovski just pounding on Brian Ortega's head, and then Herb Dean asks him, "How many fingers am I holding up?" 2? Yeah, close enough. Everyone forgets that. Like, he does something like that where he's like, "How many fingers am I holding up?" 5. Get in there. Like, reminds you of it makes me wish Michael Chandler was on this card, because there's one of the most funniest memes ever that I can't get into about Michael Chandler before his fight with Justin Gaethje.
So we're not going to be talking about Michael Chandler. Unfortunately, that fight did fall through. We're going to be talking instead about the main event, which is Alex Pereira taking on Jiri Prochazka for the light heavyweight title. A rematch from UFC 295, which it is quite ironic that in his past 3 fights, Alex Pereira has stepped in on short notice for arguably the 3 biggest marquee cards of the UFC over the past 12 months. There was Madison Square Garden, UFC 300, and now International Fight Week. Now, I will start by giving the UFC some praise, and I will give them sort of like a pass in terms of they knew they needed a big marquee fight on short notice, and kudos to both men for stepping up and running this fight back again in less than satisfying circumstances. With that being said, though, there is a big Dagestani-shaped cloud, in my opinion, hanging over this fight. In my opinion, Magomed Ankalaev has done more than enough to earn another shot at the title. He's got the longest unbeaten streak in the division, and if it wasn't for Paul Craig pulling Paul Craig things, we'd be looking at an unbeaten fighter. Yet, for whatever reason, the UFC seem to be going out of their way and seem determined not to give him another shot at the belt. Now, there are some conspiracy theorists out there that believe that part of the reason for this is because they think with a grappling background that Magomed Ankalaev is a stylistic nightmare for Alex Pereira. And it plays into the belief that some people have, and I include myself in this, I have to admit, Alex Pereira gets favourable treatment from the UFC. Do you think this is true? Or do you think this is just tinfoil hat wearers sort of wringing their hands together and trying to cope?
I think it's super true. I buy every ounce of that, personally. I say that as a guy who I'm kind of coming around to, man. Like, he's a lot of fun, Alex Pereira. I like Jiri more, personally, as a fan. Not an analysis, but like a fandom. But Alex Pereira, he's a lot of fun. He's got some cool, like, tricks in his striking game. That said, I do believe that Jan beat him. I think so. And I think Ankalaev flings him for 2 rounds before tapping him out.
Because the thing is, this big question with Ankalaev, the big question with Alex Pereira has always been regards to his grappling. And I just think to myself, let's say he fought Fluffy Hernandez, Derek Brunson, Marvin Vettori, someone of that kind of ilk early on in his UFC run. Stuffs all their takedowns, finishes him in the second round. I don't think anyone would have any sort of doubts, any sort of criticisms regarding him. But the fact the UFC have gone out their way to avoid this question being answered, it just kind of makes me think they don't have the confidence that his grappling's up to par.
Despite all the claims that, like, his coaches and him say they're not confident. I think what his coaches say, it isn't necessarily indicative of the truth, because there are a lot of guys who look great in sparring. I don't know of anybody in particular. There's some guys who just look amazing in sparring, but in, like, the real deal, they probably would suck. You know? I was one of those guys. Maybe it's like that, with what's it called, like his grappling. Maybe, you never really know until you see it. All I know is Israel Adesanya took him down and manhandled him.
Like, I just imagine if, like, Ankalaev versus Pereira did happen. Ankalaev shoots for the takedown in the first 30 seconds, and we get this, like, James Toney level of cluelessness on the mat.
It would be embarrassing. It would be embarrassing for the sport and for the UFC.
Yeah, and that's always just been the sort of question mark. I want that answer. I want that question answered. And once it does get answered, I don't think I would have any problem with the guy.
Yeah, for me, I wonder if they're afraid of popping this balloon. Because I think once you pop the cork on this, and you have a guy like Ankalaev, who, by the way, we have to add in the fact that Ankalaev stupidly said, "No, I'll just knock him out on the feet." Stop it. Stop it. This is me pleading to every fighter on the roster that could fight him. Stop striking with him. You could argue he's the best striker in MMA history. Don't. It makes me so mad. I will never forget when Ankalaev said that. I just went and smoked a cigarette on the porch by myself. Yeah, God. But God, I'm getting mad. It's like legitimately why I'm laughing. I'm starting to get angry with Ankalaev, and he's not even around. But I think if Ankalaev gets in there and double legs him, I think that you pop the cork on this. You can't put the cork back, really. Everyone knows you got exposed kind of mentality. And just, I think at that point you lose a star. This is a guy who made himself a star with his fighting style and his, like, admittingly how meme worthy he is. Like, he's very meme worthy without trying to be. He is charismatic, but he's very stone faced charismatic. And he kind of made himself into a star just being himself. Like, we found some fascination with him, and the UFC's given him this favorable kind of sorry, and a friend of mine said something really stupid to me, I think. I just saw it pop up on my computer. I went, oh, I did this idiot. But I love him to death. If he ever watches this, I love you. But come on, man. Yeah, I think, what's it called? I'm muting him. What's it called? I think he's got, like, the favorable matchmaking because he made himself a star, and the UFC loves it when they can capitalize on someone without putting the work minimalistic effort. Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to get to, and they're really afraid of losing out with this guy because this guy's money. Like, this guy is money. Right now for them.
So we're going to go back to November because this is a rematch, and it's a rematch which only took place very short space of time, which I'm not the biggest fan of. I always like a little bit of time to build, a little bit of momentum when it comes to rematches. Obviously, in this circumstance, we can't be afforded that. Obviously, we had to watch this fight to do some research. What were the big takeaways that you had watching Alex and Jiri fight the first time?
I wanted Jiri to win. I was expecting Alex Pereira to win because of Jiri just not taking him down. That said, I didn't think Jiri would have as much success on the feet as he did. He was actually catching Pereira a little bit. His weird style was having some success. I can understand him going, oh, if I just, channel more samurai spirit into my game plan, I have him. And it's like, I can understand why he thinks he could do it. Do I think it's smart what he's going to do? No. But it's definitely, like, it's not the worst idea in the world. Okay, it is the worst idea in the world. I'm trying to defend him. It is the worst idea in the world, but he at least was having success with the path of most resistance, I guess would be the phrasing I could use. And I remember him taking him down, actually.
He did, yes.
Yeah. I mean, Jiri himself isn't the best grappler or wrestler, but he does have some submissions, to his credit. He's mostly just knocking everyone senseless. I think we've seen that he did have success. People are probably going to look at the finish of the fight and go, oh, man, Alex Pereira, he does that to everybody. When it's like, no, Jiri was doing really well up until that moment. We just were kind of all collectively knowing what the finish was probably going to be and just tensed up for it. And I think that's sadly how this fight might be. But, man, I love Jiri. He's so awesome. I want him to win so bad.
One of the things I noticed when watching Jiri in that fight, one of his biggest weapons was the right hook, which was the same punch that Izzy caught Pereira with. Is that a weakness?
Man, maybe. His right hook, he was doing it coming in, though. Like, he was pressing in. Whereas Izzy caught him...
He was inviting pressure. Izzy was inviting pressure.
Yeah. Whereas Jiri was the pressure. One thing I remember, too, is the low kicks eating up Jiri.
Yeah.
Because Rakic went to that instantly when they fought. Because he saw how much success Pereira had with it. But Jiri, man, he's gonna put the pressure on Pereira. He's gonna walk into fire, and we love him for it, but we're gonna be terrified of it. But that right hook, he was landing that pretty well. I remember him landing some decent little kicks in there. I think he should kick more, personally, against Pereira.
Kicker.
Yeah, you got to do it. Block that airway. cause as much traffic on the highway as possible. They say.
Well,
And
what we were talking about earlier on in the show, we talked about like Randy Couture and Pedro Hizo. If you go and watch the rematch, that was what Randy did, and it just completely threw off Pedro's game.
Yeah, you kick. The saying goes is you kick a kicker and you don't hook a hooker, and that doesn't mean anything dirty.
Maybe it's about Dan.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, Dan does have that you know dual hook moment with Carlos Condit. The example I always think of is Brad Tavares, Tim Bosch. Brad Tavares gets knocked out because he's throwing hooks, trading hooks with a guy who is a much better guy at throwing hook.
One of the things I have noticed in the build to this fight as well, which I don't know if this is going to be a factor, is that I get the impression that Jiri was much more prepared for the training camp than what Pereira is. Because from what I've heard, when they got the call, hey, you're going to be fighting a 3-3, Jiri was already in training camp, whereas Pereira was over in Australia doing like PR stuff. So I wonder maybe if there's a preparation side to things that might favour Jiri.
I like that pun. I thought I heard you say my fair Yuri instead of my fair lady randomly at the end, and I went, I like that.
If Yuri wins, we might call the post-fight reaction that my fair Yuri.
My fair Yuri. Yeah. I always think of, sadly, because I watched it recently, a clip of it, the Family Guy version. The knife. Oh. I think it's funny. Yuri has the more experience in MMA, so you would expect him to have the more ways of winning. And I do. I think the question is he going to do it?
Exactly.
I think that's what this whole fight comes down to. Is Yuri can beat him for sure. Is he going to fight that way?
If Yuri's going to win, he's going to have to fight an MMA fight, because what we've seen people doing with Alex Pereira is fighting a world champion kickboxer in a kickboxing match. And we saw that what happened with Jamal Hill. We saw what happened with Izzy the first time around. It's like, it's an MMA fight. I know wrestling's not your forte, but if you know this guy's weakness, and I say this to anybody who fights him, if you know what this guy's strengths are, take him into deep waters, take him into the places that you know he doesn't want to go. Like, honestly, like Yuri, I know Yuri's got like great facial hair. Go with a chin strap and just go full Dagestani.
It's time. It's
Vader time.
You gotta. It's Vader time. I mean, I'm gonna be so mad if Ankalaev fights Pereira. He said Dagestani. I'd be so mad if he fights Pereira and it's just like, I'm just gonna knock him out on the feet. Don't, please stop it. Like, you're killing me.
One question I
really want Yuri to full Dagestani it though. I'm right there with you.
I mean, in terms of entertainment, it wouldn't be the best thing to say, but if Yuri wants the best chance to win, it's the way you have to go. One question I do have though. Let's say Yuri does win this fight. Are the UFC going to run the trilogy fight? They've got reason to.
Probably, admittingly. I could see it. I could see him running the trilogy.
And if Alex Pereira, what's interesting to see as well is that if Alex Pereira was to win, there aren't many that contenders at light heavyweight that you can realistically give a title fight to. So the UFC either have to go with Ankalaev or ruin their sort of meritocracy argument. Like, honestly, I honestly do think they would give Anthony Smith a title fight before they would Ankalaev.
Well, you remember Anthony Smith did say...
Exactly.
He did say that he was going to try and fight. He was like, this fight lines up great before it was Roman Dolidze.
That's exactly what I was thinking, and I think the UFC would try and cash in on that.
I hate it. I really hope it doesn't happen. It should be on Goliath.
Yeah.
This division needs help, and it's getting a lot of eyes on it. In fairness, I was hoping Khalil Roundtree would help out, but he had to pop hot and ruin it for everybody.
Yeah. And I do want to stress to people who maybe think that we're being biased or being sort of like against Alex Pereira, that kind of thing. It's not our intention. What we are, we're just, we always favour meritocracy over entertainment. And maybe that creates like a less exciting product, but the UFC prides itself on being the best of the best. And in my opinion, the best person in each weight class should be champion. And if you're making reasons not to give the best person the chance to be the best, it loses, meaning. And I feel the same way about Bilal. Like, Bilal should be fighting for the welterweight title, and he shouldn't be punished for having a workhorse style.
Yeah, he's super boring, but okay, like whatever.
Yeah.
It just is what it is.
I feel like this preview show's ended on a really sour note, Joe.
It is. We gotta amp it up. Do you guys want me to make more Valentino jokes?
What you can do is give people a little bit of a preview of some of the retro reviews that we got coming up. So, if you remember at the UFC 302 preview show, we mentioned that we were going to be covering a classic Pride event. Of course, it is Pride Month here in June, and we were going to celebrate by one of the classic events from that great promotion in Japan. So, the polls are in. You've already recorded the retro review, Joe. What will we be seeing next week on INC Live?
Well, we had 4 options. Total Elimination 2003, Critical Countdown 2004, which I voted for, I'll admit, Shockwave 2004, and Final Conflict 2005. And with 46% of the vote, Final Conflict 2005 takes the cake. And you know what? I voted in this poll. I voted in all the polls. It didn't matter with this. Every one of these fights was cards was insane.
Yeah. So this
card's nuts.
That will be appearing on the INC main channel, not the main channel, on the INC Live, where Joe will be covering that. I'm splicing it together as we speak. And then in just a couple of weeks' time, UFC 304 will be happening. Now it's going to be the first British pay-per-view in Manchester since 2016. So we thought we would relive one of the classic UK cards. So we have a poll online, Joe, for what classic British card they want to vote for. What are our nominees?
Well, we had UFC 75, champion versus champion, Dan Henderson, Rampage Jackson. It's a great option, I thought. UFC 80, in your neck of the woods, literally. Yep. And Penn and Stevenson, Joe Daddy Stevenson, BJ Penn. First time BJ Penn would ever be on the Retro Review Series 138, which isn't like a well-known card. It was a
historic one,
free pay-per-view. But yeah, because it has a history, because it's the first ever 5-round main event fight, and that is a non-title fight, with Chris Lieben, Mark Munoz, one of the original nicest mofo in the game, Mark Munoz. And then there was UFC Fight Night Silva versus Bisping. That won. That won. It had 60% of the vote. I'm looking at it right here. Wow. It's not even close, dude. I was stunned that it was this big of a disparity. But I get it. This card sucks. I've already watched it. It's really bad. But that main event's really good. But I want to remind people, I'm never gonna shame anyone for voting the wrong thing. As much as we have joked about Vince McMahon just going, you like what we tell you to like. As much as we joke about doing that sometimes, I'm never gonna shame anybody for voting for something, because that main event has a lot of talking points, and I expect it's going to be 50% of the video is me just talking about that fight, because there's a lot of controversy, history, and things going on in there. That said, that card is not good. If you vote for the whole card, and that card is not good, dude. Oh my god.
And you've got it all to look forward to.
Yeah, which, in fairness, I think there is an appeal to me reviewing bad cards. I think there's an appeal there, because that means it's more time for me to crack jokes. Good fights, it's hard to crack jokes on, because I'm usually just freaking out and crying over how perfect fights are. Bad cards. Sometimes I get caught reading a book or taking a nap. You guys catch me on camera doing that.
So that is some of the things that you can look forward to on INC Live. This is the end of the UFC 303 preview show. It's been an absolute pleasure once again for Joe to be joining me. And if you donate to Patreon, it's patreon.com/It's Not Cagefighting. Not only do you help support the channel and make videos like this happen, you also get a lot of exclusive content, including INC Uncaged, where me and Joe chit the chat about pretty much anything. We've also got Joe's classic TV and film review, where I'll hopefully try and get him to finally watch the MMA episode of iCarly. We've also got a book club, which we're hoping to be starting in a couple of weeks' time as well. I've got the first one, Ronda Rousey's autobiography, her new one, which I will be getting my teeth into. So we've got all of that to look forward to on INC Live, on the Patreon page, I should say. For now, though, this is the end of the show. My name has been Karl Bainbridge. That's been Joe Neal. And we'll hope to see you again in 3 weeks' time. You're going to turn on your Oasis and get yourself a nice chicken parmo from the pizza shop, where you're going back to the UK for UFC 304. Bye-bye for now.
You're my wonder wall.